Okay, hello again. So to this second half of the slideshow and the issue of Kairos, I know on the slideshow it looks like it's part of arrangement, but really it's a separate idea. They're just together on the slideshow just to keep the content load small and not to fill you up with a whole bunch of short slideshows of 4 or 5 slides each. But it's really a different topic, and that's why it's on a different video here. And so just want to talk about these last couple of slides for you here to introduce this first homework assignment and just introduce you to really this first main concept here as we start to learn about the content of ancient rhetoric. This aspect of Kairos here is a very important aspect, and so we begin here with this notion. As you can see here from the slide, there are at least two kinds of the concept of time in the ancient Greek world. We're fairly familiar with chronos. We've got chronologies, linear time, in the sense of, we progress forward. We have the sense of we progress forward through time with, calendars and watches and moving forward through life and measuring it that way. We think back to the past and we can look back on old calendars, old diaries, things like that. But that is not the only way that the Greek world measured time. And that's really not the only way we measure time, even though chronology and this sense of chronos is one of the more sort of memorable, or the sense of time we experience probably most often, because seems like we're always watching the clock, especially during the school day. We're always watching the clock, hoping time will keep going forward as quickly as possible. But this other concept of time, Kairos, is just as important, and certainly for this thesis process here, it's possibly even more important. This concept of Kairos is this window of opportunity, the proper season, the right time, that seizing the moment, kind of almost carpe diem, sort of seize the day type idea, in which there's a right time, a right season to act, and if you miss out, it's gone, right? So there are some aspects of that, examples. The stock market is certainly full of now's the time, get in when the stocks are low, buy them then when they're starting to rise, when you sense that they're about to reach their peak before they crash, sell them, and that's sort of once it's too late, back in 2008, right before the big economic downturn. There were a lot of sort of insiders knowing that the market was going to start to take a big tumble, and so they started to offload their stocks. And the people who waited, some retirement policies, 401k things, by the end of 2008 into 2009, a lot of those insurance policies, retirement plans had decreased in value quite a bit because that window of time closed. And so that sense of Kairos, of when to act, some used it wisely, some just had no idea, and it disappeared. So battlefield strategy, again, that's certainly an aspect of maneuvering your troops, getting to the right places, the right time, trying to outflank your opponents perhaps. I'm sure there's still some of that in modern warfare, but certainly in more traditional battlefield warfare with muskets and cannons and all sorts of horseback artillery, things like that. That sort of battlefield strategy of we have to get to the high ground before our opponents do, that sort of aspect of Kairos was certainly very popular. Jesus, biblically, the New Testament talks about Jesus came in the fullness of time. The time was right. It may not have seemed quite right for his contemporaries or for the people when he later in his life during his ministry thought this was not the right time. You're supposed to be doing something else. But the Bible says he came in the fullness of time, that aspect of Kairos. This was the best time for him to come and, redeem the world and get his message across. And there are all those, cultural factors such as the Roman roads and things that enabled the spread of the gospel, that if he had come perhaps even a century earlier, the gospel may have not reached various parts of the world as easily as it did then, So there's this key aspect of time, of Kairos, and that's what we want you to start thinking about here. What are the issues that have that their season, their time is now, and will continue to be so, by the time you get to April and May. So start thinking of issues in that sense of time. What are the ideas that are important to my time, my generation, the things that matter to us now. Okay, and Gorgias certainly emphasized Kairos and extemporaneous speaking. When you're sort of improvising your speeches, talk about issues that mean things to people right now. Don't always talk about old-fashioned things from long ago that might not seem relevant to their audience or to your audience. Speak on things that matter to the people now. Isocrates says we need to discuss issues that are important today before their currency dissipates, before it's too late to talk about them. And so that's why, especially in the political season when it's coming up time for votes, especially, and there's campaign ads, that's why you don't see campaign ads several months before it's time to vote, because they know if you're not thinking about the issues now when it's time to act, there's almost no point in trying to get people to think about it, which is an unfortunate thing perhaps, but for people who don't like being bombarded with campaign ads too long, there's some positive aspects to that as well. So think about issues that matter and be sure to talk about them and get people to act before it's too late. That aspect of Kairos is important. And also relates to this other aspect of it, this exigence, the exigency, the urgency of there is some force, there's some situation, some impetus that's going to make the need to talk about this issue important. So we need to be aware of it. What are the factors going on? Is there international politics going on? Are world leaders making decisions that are going to affect you maybe in the near future or down the road? That's why politics and Kairos and rhetoric certainly unite together quite a bit, especially because there's this aspect of if you don't act now, the time to act or maybe react may be too late. And that's really this aspect of Kairos that we're trying to get you to think about. And so that's why this is really the important place to begin here when you're starting the content of thesis, is knowing the right opportunity. What are the issues that are important now, and how do I get a good understanding of that for myself and get my audience to think about it that way. There's a second point here on the slide, says be aware of the nuances of the issue. Things might change and develop in the months ahead. So as you start to do your research now and think about it, prepare the next few months, and then start in January, February, really getting your thesis down on paper. Be aware of developments that can occur. And we had several years ago a student talking about the sort of international war on terror and some of the from a military perspective and things like that. And just about a week or 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before he was about to give and present his final draft to the judges, SEAL Team 6 went in and got rid of Osama bin Laden, which didn't necessarily radically change a lot of what he had to say and what he was defending in his thesis, but that was certainly a current events aspect that he really needed to bring into his thesis, even after he'd finished writing it and before he was presenting it. He had to sort of bring in that important event into it. So we're not saying you have to read the newspaper every day or always be watching the news, but keep in mind as you're doing your research and thinking about your issues, keep your attention on where are the sources of information coming from, what are the factors, who's involved in this topic, and be aware of it right until the end. That's why we're trying to get you to pick a topic that you care about, that you're going to think about and research about for several months. And so be aware that this change might occur. And even in your own thinking, you might, as you research it, you may think here in the fall that you're going to take perhaps the negative side of this issue, or we shouldn't do this. And then after you do your research, maybe you want to switch your perspective. So there are always ideas that you want to think about. So pick a topic that is relevant and has some aspect of this concept that we call Kairos. Okay, so let's briefly wrap up this first topic with here's the homework that is due at the beginning of next class period. You'll be building upon that in the weeks ahead. So task 1 here, your first homework assignment, read through, think about where the ideas of today. Identify 5 kairotic issues of the day, 5 current events type things. It doesn't have to be necessarily newspaper headlines, again, current events, but things that matter to you and your generation, things that matter now. It doesn't have to be politics or international economics or things like that. It could be, what are the aspects of you and your audience that they should think about and care about right now this year during this season of life, okay? And phrase them, as I said, as sentences with a perspective. Don't just pick a topic. So if you want to say, one issue of the day that has some Kairos, some sense of right now, is the internet should be free for everyone. Okay, phrase it like that. Don't just say, well, one topic is the internet. Okay, don't just list 4 or 5 words and then say those are my topics. Internet, gun control, abortion. Those are issues. Those are very broad categories, but start thinking about them in terms of perspective and a side that you want to defend or investigate. Okay, say something like, don't say gun control, say the government needs to increase the number of gun control laws, or whatever your perspective is. Okay, phrase it as a nice full sentence so we can see what side you are arguing for in that issue. Okay, so it would be helpful if you're interested in some of them. It doesn't have to be necessarily 5 things that you really care about, but as you can see through on the slideshow, try to get at least 1 or 2 that you care enough about that you will pursue interested in. So if you know your thesis, you know the topic that you really want to talk about and write about, great. Make those one of your 5 issues and then give me 4 backup plans just in case. Okay. And if you don't have any idea right now, this is where you're going to start. Think about what are the things that matter today. Hopefully 1 or 2 of them should matter to you. Write those down as perspectives and then type them up as a document, email it to me as an attachment, and start keeping a good file folder of your homework assignments as we start to develop the content of this class. Okay, so the more work you can put into making it something that you care about now, the easier, the better these next few weeks of activities will be. Okay, you can hopefully you have the rest of the class period to start working on this, but you can get some help from your classmates, from your buddies, but make sure I get a list of 5 issues from everybody by the beginning of next class period. Okay, so this is where we're beginning. I hope this background in history has been sort of helpful for you, at least informative, and we will continue our look at some of the initial aspects of rhetoric and invention next time with stasis theory. All right, thank you again for your attention during these videos, and we'll talk to you next time.